Jason Carter sat in his old beat-up Toyota Corolla, fingers drumming against the steering wheel, staring across the street at the gleaming rows of trucks on display at Carter's Trucks. From the outside, the dealership looked like the very definition of success. Shiny vehicles, clean pavement, well-dressed salesmen floating around like bees in a hive. It was the kind of place most people would assume was doing everything right. But Jason knew better, or at least he feared he didn't. He wasn't just another customer, he was the owner. 15 years ago, he'd started Carter's Trucks from scratch, working 7 days a week, cold-calling suppliers, scrubbing the showroom floors himself. Now it was one of the top dealerships in the state, with branches opening in nearby cities. But lately, something hadn't felt right. Sales were still decent, but customer reviews were a mess. Some praised the great selection and good prices. Others accused the place of hidden fees, rude managers, and bait-and-switch schemes. Jason couldn't ignore it anymore. So here he was, 3-day stubble on his jaw, old flannel shirt, dusty jeans, and a ball cap pulled low over his eyes. His usual Rolex had been swapped for a plastic drugstore watch. Nobody here, especially not the newer staff, had ever met him in person. He'd been working remotely, handling expansion, trusting his people to keep the flagship location honest. Big mistake. Today, he wasn't Jason Carter. He was Mike Thompson, a construction worker with 35 grand saved up and looking to buy a work truck. He even created a backstory. Single dad, works long hours, needs something reliable. All lies, of course, but necessary ones. As he stepped onto the lot, he spotted Dan Reynolds watching from the glass showroom. Dan was the recently promoted sales manager. He had the look of someone who enjoyed power too much. Slick hair, tailored suit, fake charm. "Welcome to Carter's Trucks," a young, energetic salesman approached with a grin. "I'm Tom. What brings you in today?" Jason gave a small nod and adjusted his voice to something more high-pitched, slightly weary. "Hey, I'm Mike. Been saving for a while, looking to upgrade my work truck. Construction work's hell on wheels, you know?" Tom's eyes lit up. "You came to the right place. What's your budget looking like?" "Got about 35K ready to go." Perfect. That was a solid, middle-range amount. And it would let Jason see how his employees handled a normal customer. Not too broke, not too rich. Tom led him through the lot, throwing out specs and praise for every truck like a walking commercial. But Jason wasn't just listening. He was watching how Tom described the trucks, what he emphasized, what he left out, and especially what extra charges he tried to sneak in. They stopped in front of a silver Ford F-150. Jason knew the model well. It was one of their best sellers and conveniently priced just a hair above his stated budget. "This baby came in just last week," Tom said. "Great engine, killer towing power, and our exclusive Carter's protection package included." Jason's ears perked up. Included? That was wrong. The protection package was supposed to be optional, an add-on for customers who wanted extra coverage. It definitely wasn't supposed to be bundled into the price by default. "Mind if I pop the hood?" Jason asked, playing the part of the cautious but practical buyer. Tom hesitated for just a second before nodding. "Sure, go ahead." While Jason looked under the hood, he snuck glances back at the showroom. Dan was still watching. Not casually, intently, like a lion waiting for his kill. After the test drive, Jason agreed to go inside and start the paperwork. That's when things really started to stink. Tom's confidence wavered as they sat at his desk. His fingers shook a bit as he pulled up numbers on the computer. "So, Mr. Thompson, the base price is $37,000. Then there's the premium protection package and the standard processing fees." Jason leaned in a little. "Processing fees?" Before Tom could answer, a commotion broke out at the desk next to them. Raised voices, anger, desperation. Jason turned slightly, acting uninterested, but his heart rate shot up. This was it. A middle-aged man, work-worn hands, red delivery uniform, dark circles under his eyes, stood clutching a crumpled stack of papers. "This isn't right," he said, voice cracking. My wife and I, we saved for 2 years. We budgeted everything to the last dollar. A photo fell from the papers, a picture of 3 young kids around a birthday cake. Dan Reynolds walked over, suit perfect, smile fake. Mr. Henderson, Dan said smoothly, I understand your frustration, but these fees are in the fine print. He pointed to tiny print at the bottom of a document. Market adjust fee, extended warranty, premium service package, these are standard. Mark, Jason now knew the man's name, looked broken, but Josh told me the total would be $32,000. We signed for 32. Josh is no longer with the company, Dan said with a shrug. Verbal discussions are overridden by signed agreements. You should have read it more carefully. Jason's blood boiled. He noticed something else. The date stamp on the contract was today. The ink looked fresh. My daughter's starting college this fall, Mark whispered. I need this truck for work. Dan's smile never wavered. 2 options. Pay the new total or forfeit your deposit. Jason nearly jumped out of his chair. $5,000 gone, just like that. The trap was simple and cruel. Stretch beyond your budget or walk away with nothing. This is robbery, Mark said, his voice a mix of rage and helplessness. I'm reporting this to the owner. Dan's eyes gleamed with malice. Feel free. Mr. Carter's very busy. I'm sure your complaint will reach him, eventually. Jason clenched his fists under the table. He remembered a moment from his own childhood, his dad being conned by a sleazy dealer. That memory had fueled his dream to open a better dealership. And now, right under his nose, it had turned into this. He kept his cool. Barely. Actually, he said to Tom, his voice calm. Can I get a full breakdown of all the fees? Just want to be clear before I sign anything. Tom nodded, clearly rattled. Meanwhile, Mark Henderson gathered his papers, shoulders slumped, and walked out like a man who'd just been mugged. Jason watched Dan slink back to his office, satisfied. He had seen enough to know something ugly had taken root in his business. But he needed proof, real proof. Because what he just witnessed, it wasn't a fluke. It was the system. And Jason Carter was going to tear it down from the inside. Jason stayed in character, nodding along like a regular customer as Tom fumbled through the paperwork. But inside, his mind was a storm. He had just seen a man get blindsided out of thousands of dollars, and the worst part, it was being done with confidence, like this wasn't rare. It was routine, a practiced scam, dressed up in business casual and sweet talk. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Say, those fees the manager was going on about, those gonna show up on mine too? Tom hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Dan's office, like a nervous kid checking for the principal. He swallowed hard and looked around before whispering, Look, Mr. Thompson, I probably shouldn't say this, but Jason gave him a look. Not angry, just understanding. A little pressure without force. Dan's got this system, Tom said, voice barely above a whisper. We're told to keep the quotes low up front, get folks excited, emotionally committed to a vehicle. Then, right before the final papers, we drop the fees in, protection package, market adjustment, premium this and that. If we don't do it, we get punished. Jason raised his eyebrows, keeping his cool. Punished? Yeah, Tom nodded. Early morning shifts, dead hours, no good leads, no commission, basically. It's like being benched. And that guy, Josh, Tom's mouth tightened, tried to do the right thing, didn't play the game. Dan got rid of him. Jason tapped the desk, slow and thoughtful, his phone secretly recording every word. He needed more. Needed to know how wide the rot had spread. Mind if I use the restroom? Jason asked casually, pushing his chair back. Tom looked relieved. Yeah, sure. Straight past the finance office. Jason wandered through the showroom slowly, playing the part of a guy browsing trucks, but his real focus was elsewhere. He passed. A young couple sitting with another salesman, wide-eyed and hopeful. The salesman's voice was syrupy, his smile wide. but his hands moved quickly over the paperwork. Jason couldn't hear everything, but the rhythm was the same. Build excitement, blur the details, slide in the fees last. By the vending machine, he overheard two employees talking and laughing. Dude, that guy was so hyped about the truck, didn't even see the premium package added in. By the time he called, cooling off period was over. Too late. Jason's stomach turned. This wasn't one rogue manager. This was a culture. He passed the customer lounge where a young farmer was sipping coffee and flipping through a brochure. Jason sat next to him, pretending to be interested in the same pamphlet. Good trucks here? Jason asked, easy and casual. Hope so, the guy replied with a shrug. Price seemed fair, but then they mentioned some state market fee or something. Said it's new, some regulation thing. Jason bit his tongue. There was no such thing as a state market fee. Another lie, dressed up in fake authority. He walked back to Tom's desk slowly, passing the dealership's wall of awards. Best customer service, top seller in the region, community hero. They looked like jokes. Now, like trophies given to a con artist for smiling during a robbery. As he sat down again, Jason decided to push harder. That protection package. What if I don't want it? It's a lot of extra cost. Tom sighed, shoulders sagging slightly. Technically, it's optional, but if you say no, the financing department gets weird. Suddenly, your loan gets declined, or they say your trade-in dropped in value. It's all connected. Dan checks every contract before it's finalized. Jason kept his expression neutral, but in his mind, the pieces were lining up fast. Sales manipulation, fake fees, threats and punishments for honest staff. Dan had turned this dealership into a well-oiled scam machine. Just then, Dan came out of his office again. Jason watched him approach a struggling sale across the floor. The customer looked uncertain, brows furrowed, asking questions. Dan swooped in with charm and practiced sympathy. I understand your concern, absolutely. But let's be honest, this is the best deal you're going to find in the state. No other dealership's going to give you this much value. And remember, we're including all the extras. That's peace of mind, right? Jason watched the couple nod slowly, confused and overwhelmed, but too embarrassed to push back. Dan closed the deal in 5 minutes flat. Back at Tom's desk, Jason looked over his deal. The base price had already crept higher, and now there were 3 mysterious new fees listed. Dealer Advantage Plus, Final Prep Service, and Protection Assurance, none of which had been mentioned out loud. Jason smiled grimly. They were setting the same trap for him. But now, he had enough. He had recordings, testimony, observations. He'd seen the system in motion. The only thing left was to trigger the final confrontation, get Dan to admit everything on tape. Jason stood up and stretched, acting like he was ready to buy. You know what, Tom? Before I sign anything, I think I'd like to talk to the manager. That Dan guy. Just want to make sure I understand these charges. Tom's face turned pale. You sure? Jason nodded. Yeah. Set it up? Reluctantly, Tom walked over to Dan's office. Jason watched through the glass as Tom explained. Dan's expression changed from irritation to interest. He nodded, adjusted his tie, and waved Jason in. Here it comes, Jason thought, stepping into the manager's office. Dark wood, expensive furniture, family photos on the shelf to make him look relatable. Jason sat down across from Dan, whose smile was wide but cold. Mr. Thompson, Dan said, his voice slick as oil. I hear you have some questions? Jason smiled back, but this time it wasn't fake. It was the calm of a hunter who knows. The prey is right where he wants it. Yeah, he said. Let's talk about how business is really done around here. Jason sat back in the leather chair, relaxed but alert. He had his phone recording again, hidden neatly in his shirt pocket. Dan sat across from him, confident and calm, like a man who thought he'd done this dance 100 times and always came out on top. So, Jason began casually, I just want to be straight here. I noticed what happened earlier. That customer, Mark, he said he was told one thing, then you guys added all those fees at the end. I'm just trying to avoid the same surprise. Dan chuckled, leaning back with his fingers laced behind his head. Ah, yes, Mr. Henderson, emotional buyer. Meant well, but let's just say, not a details guy. Jason kept his face blank. So those fees aren't standard then? Dan leaned forward, dropping his voice into that confidential tone. Scam artists love to use when pretending they're letting you in on a secret. Let me level with you, Mike. This business isn't really about selling trucks. It's about selling dreams. People don't want trucks. They want power, security, something that makes them feel like their life's going somewhere. He stood up and walked over to the office window, pointing out toward the showroom. Look at them. Most of those folks don't even know what half the features are. They just know they want something new, something shiny. So we guide them, help them stretch their budget a little. You understand, right? Jason gave a slow nod. So, stretch their budget with extra fees. Dan smirked. Nobody likes to think they got played. By the time they see the final price, they're already emotionally attached. They've told their spouse, their kids, posted about it online. You think they're gonna walk away over a couple grand? No chance. Jason felt his stomach twist, but he kept his voice calm. And the owner's okay with that? Dan laughed. Carter? That old fool's too busy opening new locations and counting his money. He hasn't set foot in this showroom in over a year. As long as the numbers look good, he doesn't care how we get there. Jason didn't blink. So you're saying he doesn't know about any of this? Nope, Dan said proudly. And he won't. Because I make sure he sees exactly what he wants to see. He paused, then stepped closer with a grin. Tell. You what, Mike? I like you. You're sharp. So, here's the deal. That protection package, technically mandatory, but I can make it disappear for a little off-the-record cash bonus. Happens all the time. Jason raised an eyebrow. You're saying I can pay you to take it off the books? Dan winked. Call it a favor for understanding how things work. Look, I've made more this year in kickbacks and adjustments than Carter probably makes in real profit. It's a beautiful system. Everyone's scared to speak up. The ones who matter play along. The rest, they either get out or get silenced. Jason sat there, absorbing it all. This wasn't just a dirty practice. It was a full-blown empire of lies, built in his name. Dan walked back around the desk, pulled out a contract and slid it across. So, you in? Or do I need to find another customer who gets how the game is played? Jason took a slow breath and stood. Then, he dropped the act. Actually, I think we need to talk about your future here. Dan blinked. Come again? Jason reached up, pulled off his ball cap, and stood tall, letting his real voice come out, firm, steady, unmistakable. My name's Jason Carter. I'm the owner of this dealership. Dan's face drained of color so fast, it was like someone had yanked the blood from his body. What? Mr. Carter, I didn't know. You didn't care, Jason snapped, stepping closer. That's the problem. He tapped the button on his phone. Dan's voice echoed through the office loud and clear. The customers are too desperate. The staff's too afraid. I've made more in kickbacks. Jason stopped the recording and looked Dan dead in the eye. You're done. Before Dan could move, Jason marched out of the office and straight to the intercom at the front desk. He hit the button. All staff to the showroom floor. Now. Within minutes, everyone started trickling in. Salespeople, finance clerks, even mechanics poking their heads in. Most had never seen Jason in person, and they whispered in confusion. Jason stood in front of them all, eyes sharp, voice steady. For those who don't know, I'm Jason Carter. I own this place. And what I saw today was corruption. Plain and simple. He held up his phone and pressed play again. Dan's voice filled the room. His schemes, his bragging, his total contempt for customers and co-workers alike. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few people exchanged guilty looks. Others looked relieved, like they'd been waiting for this moment. Tom, Jason said, pointing at the young salesman who'd helped him. Tell them what you told me. About the sales quotas, the shift punishments, all of it. Tom stepped forward, nervous but determined. He laid it out, just like he had earlier. When he finished, Jason turned to the crowd. If you've been part of this system, if you were forced to lie or pressured to cheat customers, now's the time to speak up. If you help clean this up, we'll work with you. If you try to hide anything, you're gone. And if you think this is all talk, I've already contacted the company's legal counsel. Investigations start tonight. Dan tried to slink toward the back, but Jason pointed at him. Don't even think about it. 2 security guards entered from the hallway. Escort Mr. Reynolds off the premises. He's fired. Effective immediately. Dan flailed. You're making a mistake. This place won't survive without me. I'd rather rebuild from ashes than keep running a lie, Jason replied. Get out. As Dan was dragged away, Jason turned back to his employees. This ends now. Tomorrow we start over. No more scams. No more lies. Just honest work, honest deals, and real trust. A hush fell over the room, broken only when someone at the back started clapping, and then others joined in. But Jason wasn't smiling yet. There was still a mountain of damage to fix, and a lot of trust to rebuild. But at least now they could begin. The next morning, Jason didn't sit in his office like he used to. He rolled up his sleeves and planted himself right in the middle of the showroom floor. No fancy suit, no manager's corner. Just him, a laptop, and a stack of customer files, spread across a desk for everyone to see. He wanted his people and his customers to know that the cleanup wasn't just a performance. It was real. The dealership was quieter than usual at first. People were still in shock. Dan Reynolds had ruled with fear, manipulation, and greed for over a year, and removing him didn't just end the corruption, it exposed the cracks left behind. Employees were uncertain. Customers were cautious. Jason understood that trust wasn't something you could demand back. You had to earn it. The first major step came in the form of a thick folder placed on his desk by none other than Tom. I've been keeping records, Tom said quietly. Every sketchy deal, every time Dan told us to bump the price or hide a fee, dates, names, contracts, everything. Jason flipped through the pages and saw it wasn't just a handful of notes. It was a detailed log, a paper trail of deceit. You took a big risk keeping this, Jason said, impressed. Tom looked nervous but determined. My dad always said integrity's what you do when nobody's watching. Jason smiled. Your dad raised a good man. How do you feel about leading our new customer advocacy department? Tom blinked. Seriously? Seriously. The changes started rolling in quickly. Jason formed a task force made up of honest staff, new hires, veterans who had resisted Dan's tactics, and yes, even a few who had gone along with the scams, but stepped forward to admit their part and make it right. They rewrote every process from scratch. Digital pricing boards were installed in the showroom to show real-time prices with all fees included. No more games, no last-minute surprises. He brought back Josh, the fired salesman who had refused to cheat customers, and gave him a new role, head of sales training. Teach them the right way, Jason said. Make honesty the norm, not the exception. Josh grinned. You got it, boss. The next step? Jason started calling every single customer who had been overcharged. In the last 6 months, the calls were long, some were emotional, some were angry, but every call ended the same way, with Jason owning the mistake and promising to make it right. He offered refunds where appropriate, apologies where needed, and in some cases, additional compensation if customers had suffered real damage. One day, a familiar face returned to the lot, Mark Henderson, the man who had nearly lost his life savings in Dan's scam. Jason greeted him personally. I came back to see if you meant what you said, Mark said, arms folded across his chest. About making it right. I did, Jason said. I looked over your file. You'll get your truck at the original price Josh promised, 32 flat. And the protection package? On the house. No tricks. Mark's eyes softened, but Jason wasn't done. I also heard your daughter's starting college. Carter's Trucks is setting up a scholarship in her name for customers' kids pursuing higher education. She'll be our first recipient. Mark blinked hard, jaw trembling. My wife's gonna cry when she hears this, he said quietly. She deserves to cry happy tears for a change, Jason replied. Word spread quickly. News outlets picked up the story, not just the undercover boss exposing corruption, but the radical overhaul that followed. A dealership that changed its culture read one headline. Carter's comeback read another. But Jason wasn't interested in headlines. He was interested in the people walking into his dealership and walking out with what they paid for, and nothing more. 6 months later, Carter's Trucks hosted a community appreciation day. Free food, music, games for kids. No sales gimmicks, no pressure. Just an invitation to come see what the dealership had become. Jason stood near the grill, flipping burgers and shaking hands. Nearby, Tom was showing an elderly couple around a new model truck, walking them through every detail with patience and clarity. Josh gave a tour to a group of new hires, pointing out which parts of the process had been reformed and why. Mark Henderson was there too, now something of a local hero. His truck parked right in front, polished and proud, a symbol of everything that had been set right. As the sun dipped low over the parking lot, Jason stood at the same place he had months earlier, the edge of the lot, looking out at the rows of trucks. But everything was different now. Not just the lighting, or the signs, or the paperwork. It was the feeling. The weight of secrets was gone. A little girl ran past him with cotton candy. Somewhere nearby, a customer laughed as they rang the bell for a completed sale, and none of it felt fake. Back inside, Jason placed one last item in his office, a framed picture of his father's old dealership, a tiny, modest place where values came first. Next to it, he hung a sign with simple black letters. Trust is earned, one honest deal at a time. He turned out the lights, locked up, and walked to his car. The same beat-up Toyota he'd driven when this whole thing began. He didn't need a flashy ride to feel successful tonight. He had his business back, and more importantly, he had his soul back.